Why, hello there. It's me, Jeremy, your favorite bald dude telling you about Standard and Strange, a store and a brand with simple rules. Sell clothes they themselves would wear, manufacture it ethically, and build it to last. From boots made in Oregon to loop wheel garments made in Japan, find all the best clothes for your wardrobe at Standard and Strange. StandardandStrange.com. Hey everybody, with your new USB-C iPhone or whatever it is that you got, it's Jeremy. You're listening to Blammo. How we all doing? I'm back from New York and I'm exhausted. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm dead. I'm dead to the world. It was a good trip. You know, it was one of those trips where it felt like everything went right while also everything could not have gone worse. Sort of trips, right? Thanks to everyone that came out to our event at J. Crew. It was great. Lots of folks came out to see Brendan and I and check out some dope suits. Yeah, it was a good time. Then, I had a bunch of recording planned. I had a special guest for this Patreon pod and everything. I mean, it just all went way south. I recorded some other stuff, then files went corrupt on my mobile unit. I mean, it was just all bad. But hey, everybody, life goes on. Now I'm back. I'm watching my son throw Cheerios all over the place. Back to reality. Look, there's no good transition right now, but my guest, Mr. Benjamin Edgar got. Most of you know him as Benjamin Edgar. He's a designer, he's an artist, and he's someone I wanted to chat with for, a really long time. Look, I mean, I'll say this. As the show has grown, less and less of these folks are people in the Rolodex. In fact, I don't know, hardly any are. And so sometimes I get linked with someone and I'm like, okay, here it goes. Do they listen to the pod? Do they even care? Is this something that they even want to do? And it could not have been any further from that with Benjamin. I mean, he was down for all of it. And it was a really beautiful chat about his practice, why he thinks the way he thinks. And I felt even more connected to his work after we wrapped. We discuss life in Chicago, starting his career at age 17, falling in love with art and the library, shout out the public library, co-founding the Brilliance, Boxed Water, creating an object company, the infamous cigarette holder, oh, you know what I'm talking about, and his relationship with the late Virgil Abloh. This was a good one, folks. Let's dive in.
Yeah, I'm like I said, super honored to be invited, honestly.
Dude, come on. You're like a legit artist.
It's an interesting, maybe we could get into that. And I listened to your one with Lauren Sherman, right? Was recently?
Yeah.
And you guys were talking about not living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like such an interesting topic in and of itself because you can feel quite removed from maybe even what your perception of the projects you're working on are. You know what I mean?
But you're at least in a big city, right? Because you're in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, yeah.
And that's still, I mean, a very respected place.
No, for sure. But it's not, I mean, I'm in New York about every 2 to 3 weeks, which is like a lot. But
whoa.
Yeah, I've been doing that for quite a while, for a few years, actually. So it's like I'm always there. It's, an hour and 45-minute flight from O'Hare. It's super quick. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm definitely a Chicagoan.
Yeah. So, I mean, because we're Midwest folks. Are you a Cub guy? Or are you a Sox guy?
Sox, for sure. Sox.
Okay. Well, there you go. You passed the test. This pod will now continue.
Yeah, definitely Sox. I live on the north side now, which is weird, but I'm from the south side. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go. Because north side's all Cubbies. Are you like Olympia Field, south side, sort of?
That's bizarrely close to where I'm from. Yeah, I was born in East Hazel Crest, lived all over like Chicago Heights, Park Forest, and Homewood, and all that stuff. And then I'm in the city downtown on the Gold Coast now.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So what was your situation like? So you grew up, you're Chicago through and through. Never left?
No, I lived in Michigan for some work stuff for a while as well. For quite a sprint, actually. I lived in Grand Rapids for about 10 years.
What were you doing there?
When I left home, I left home when I was about 18. Actually, 2 weeks after high school, I was a software developer. That's kind of how I got into this whole world. And so I skipped college into that whole thing. But when I was 17, the internet was kind of becoming more part of our lives. And my father had a friend who was starting a startup. He was wealthy and was like, hey, would your son be able to help me out? And so my senior year of high school, I had like a very small, but still a salary while I was in high school, and that like kind of screws your brain up a little bit in terms of how you view maybe your next steps in life. And he was like, are you going to college? And I was like, yeah, maybe. I was going to go to Columbia here in Chicago.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, would you come work for the summer and see if you like it? And I kind of like never looked back. And it was a time where like I didn't feel such a huge attachment to the city, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, blue skies are ahead. Try this crazy thing out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a very weird way to like start life. If you think about it, you know, not only no college, but like no drifting, like straight into work, you know?
Oh my God. So yeah, like no like punk band in the middle of your career sort of thing. It's just work? Not
really. I would say right now is probably more the punk band phase of my life in the past 5 to 6 years, where it's my wilderness years than that time. I just worked, you know?
Like, so you were working as a software developer?
Yeah, I was a web developer back when like a web developer did the front end, the back end, the whole thing. Yeah, I was a classic ASP and SQL developer. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. That it's interesting. So you didn't go to college?
No.
Dude, welcome to the club.
Okay, good. That makes me feel good.
Can I ask you a question? And I don't want to project on you here, but like, do you feel the insecurity of not having a degree sometimes?
You know, it's really weird. I think when you're really young, I think my personality was significantly different at that time in my life. It was very like punk, to use that word, to not do it and to have found some financial success, which, you know, financial success is great, but it's like, are you happy? Do you like the work you're doing? You learn those things later, I think, in life. When you're young, it's just like, holy shit, like,
I have money.
How did I go from having a teacher 3 weeks ago telling me what to do to like my own apartment and like, you know, never had a roommate, like, you know what I mean? Like and my father's a carpenter and my mom was a school teacher. It's not like, you know.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting transition in my life. So for so long, and then like a couple startups, and then like life kind of ticked up and the Brilliance and like other things that happened. I was just like, why on earth would you go to college? But that fades over time, and you start realizing like really great relationships can be built from college or further education. It's your choice. Like now it's my job to stay up to date and be educated and like work on things. So no, I've never really felt any insecurity. I don't know, maybe I did because I just was like, oh, good to hear that you didn't too. But, you know, there's like something that I think I've been at like dinner parties or whatever with the higher echelon of people. And some of them are truly confused by it. They're like, so what did you do after high school? And I was like, I was just working. And they're just like, what? Yeah. It's really confusing for some people, I think.
I'm totally with you. So like, I mean, my situation was in a sense that like, I didn't have a job per se, but I was like, I'm going to New York to go be, you know, a rock star, right?
I think that's even harder than what I did. Like
well, I don't know.
You and Chris Black did the same thing. And sometimes I'm like, man, that's tricky because you're not going to have a nice apartment. It's going to be hard, you know, like.
I mean, it was hard in ways, but I mean, I had a lot of advantages just being, you know, an idiot. And I think there was an ignorance or a naivete and maybe an assumption that just like, I don't need this stuff to be in this world. Like, I don't need that. But when in like my darkest hours, and I was, you know, when I didn't really know what I was doing and I was looking for other jobs or other things in my life and I was unsure of where I was, I kept thinking, oh, you know, the real reason. It's because you never did this, you know? And
that's a heavy feeling.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying you had that, but other people I know who are, in your case, you know, very successful, but don't have the traditional background, you know, because people would be like, well, Steve Jobs didn't go to college or do this. And I'm just like,
it gets lauded even for me. And I think it's like chill on celebrating it too much. It's an edge case, I think. Less so now. Now it's more normal. Back then, I mean, dude, it was crazy.
Well, and I think, that's the thing too, right? Where you did go to a higher education, I'm air quoting that. You had the higher education experience of that part in your life. It was just a very different structure. You know, I mean, the paper means, unless you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to go into finance stuff. And in most cases, it means nothing. Yeah.
I remember being in the room when some of the companies I either started or just things I was around, or those MBA types would be around, Harvard MBA types and things. And I remember feeling so removed from them. And not like in a bad way. Like we could totally go out and have a drink, have a great dinner and all that. But in the business setting, I think when you're starting your own thing, even a podcast, like anything that you're starting from zero, it just rewires your brain. And I'm like, I don't understand why I need the validation of, education or whatever. If you made something and people are responding to it, that's really hard to do. And then to continue to grow it and to continue to take personal satisfaction for it or create something that's maybe financially sustainable is so difficult that when I see someone who hasn't gone through that, I think I have a little chip on my shoulder and I have to be careful of that. But I'm just like, have you felt the pain and built the scar tissue of doing something that completely fails and then trying to do it again,
Yeah. And I think that's the exact thing, is to which the only thing that I feel like the non-traditional, and I'm curious, if this is the same with you, of having the non-traditional higher education, it was funny because I talked to a friend of mine who has been through all of the traditional higher educations, and I've shared these insecurities with him. And he's like, no, you just had a non-traditional one. He's like, you still had it. And he's like, but the thing that happens with people that have those similar experiences is there's less of a structure applied to more of the ideas that you have in the best way, in the sense that I don't need to go through A, B, C, D, and E to get here.
We're very intuition driven, which doesn't always work.
Yeah. It's like, look, I just need to build the thing. So whatever steps I need to take to make that, I can do it, versus, well, sorry, because your training and, told you needed to have this to move here. We're just like, that doesn't matter. If we can build this product, or if we can make this thing together or achieve this idea, then, it doesn't necessarily matter as much. And in a weird way, that was like the security blanket he gave me that I think about a lot more, into which I'm not so focused on processes for better and for worse. It's more on product and collaboration.
I would say that. I would say the same thing. The processes come in after you maybe, let's say you make a widget or a service or something and it finds a little bit of success and you want to replicate that or grow that, then some process is helpful. But in the beginning, it's just like, I talk about my friends with the object company. It's probably one of the purest companies I've started because we buy all the inventory up front. We do all the design work, all the photography. Everything gets done up front. No one knows about it, goes on the site. And then you sit there and go, is it going to work? It's a very brutal form of business. And then if it works, you're trying to figure out, a better supply chain, maybe some better pricing. But all I'm looking for in the beginning is their demand.
Right.
That's it.
So you have the very non-traditional background. You do the software thing. And where did all the art stuff come in? Because I think for other people I know that know you, they talk about you as an artist first.
That's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
The art was always there. Young, growing up, my mom would take me to the Art Institute here in Chicago. Lots of field trips there. I remember kind of formative seeing contemporary art when it wasn't in the modern wing of the Institute here in Chicago, when it was in an older wing, and seeing a particular piece by, I want to say it was Dan Flavin. I can't remember. No, it wasn't Dan Flavin. It doesn't really matter, but it had some nudity in it that seemed really crass. And I remember I was 7 asking my mom, I thought we're supposed to be quiet in the museum and this is this special place. That looks like a really bad dick drawing. Oh, Bruce Nauman. It was a Bruce Nauman piece. And I only found that out that it was a Bruce Nauman piece 5 or 6 years ago. I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, that's, she was trying to explain to me contemporary art, basically. And something happened, I think, that I didn't really realize till many years later. But art was a big part of it, seeing Monet's haystacks and things like that at the Institute, and really kind of liking the environment of being around art and the freedom that came with it. And oddly enough, I would say the programming is when it really kicked in. When I really got into programming was when I was 13, taught myself how to program in BASIC at the public library. And
wow.
Yeah, really nerdy. And it felt like I had unlimited Lego pieces now because I could just make, I didn't need to buy more Lego sets. If I had a new idea, I could just program more stuff. And I was never actually a terribly good programmer, but I was obsessed with the output of it, the final product and this complete control that you had. And it didn't cost you any money. It was just time, and when you're 13 or 14, you can stay up 24 hours. It doesn't bother you,
Yeah.
And I felt such a freedom in the software development space. And then the internet hit, and then it was we could express ourselves publicly.
What sort of environment are you in that gives you the confidence to go teach yourself BASIC at 13?
And the confidence? I don't know. This is where you really start to, you and I'm assuming are somewhat similar in age, and we bridge the literally no internet and internet, super weird part of humanity, in my opinion, that because it's just such a moment in time. I think I just hung out at the library a lot. I don't know. I was really into skateboarding and then the library. Even if you ask my mom, those were the two places that I wasted my time. And I think
it's rare that you had individuals who would do both.
I wasn't like the stoner skater guy. I mean, we were all in that crew. I just liked skateboarding. It was a huge part of my life from age 7 till technically now. That little edit on the Vans collaboration I did, that is me indeed ollieing on the ice, which was like one of the stupidest things to do in your 40s, but it took a lot of tries. But no, I don't have a good answer for the confidence side of things. I think sometimes I wonder why does the mind choose those things? Like, why didn't I do something else? You know?
Yeah.
It seems random.
It definitely is like that. I mean, we hung out at the library when I was younger just because there wasn't really any other thing to do, and my mom would do it because it was free. You know, I mean, I didn't come from much money.
Probably similar reasons, honestly. Yeah,
you could go there, and there was always, you know, stuff to do, kind of air quoting, and we didn't have cable. But when I found out that you could freaking rent VHS from the library, and the stuff that you could rent was like Terry Gilliam stuff, and it was like, you know, I think we'd gotten like Faulty Towers and stuff from the library, which is John Cleese's like epic comedy television show. You know, all these things. I'm like, how does the library have this stuff? It was
when I discovered they had all the magazines. I was like, wait, all of them?
Yeah.
I was like, so why do you buy them?
Did you?
You know?
Did your library have, what was it, like the microfilm thing where it's like you put the little
microfiche? Yeah, I never tried it though.
It was always nuts because it's not the best experience to try to read anything, right? But you had like newspapers that
from like 100 years ago. Yeah, pretty unbelievable stuff. Yeah,
it was. But to me, it's still amazing, and it's funny now because I took my daughter. I have a 5-year-old. And we take her to the library and get books and stuff. And she was like, "Dad, who owns the library?"
Great question.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, if I'm borrowing these books, whose are they?" And I was like, "Well, Harriet," I'm like, technically,
unpack here.
Yeah, I was like, "We all own the library." I was like, "It's the community, and we all share it and all this stuff." And she's like, "Well, why don't we do that with cars?" I'm like, "Oh, wow."
Man,
5. There's so much
direction she's headed in life.
Yeah, I know. She's like, "Why don't we do that with everything?" And you know, and I was like, "Yeah, it's a valid
question." I mean, all the complexities that come with that, but I love that. But that's like, okay, so the library prompted her to have that question. That's the point of the library to me. Like, mission accomplished. It's not even about the book. It's this like vast trove of data, but it's really kind of like how you feel when you're there, or the questions it may prompt, you know?
Yeah, I think the library in itself gives a bit of confidence to where
absolutely
most librarians and people who work in libraries they're not questioning your age when you are wanting to do something. At least for me, I never remember that happening when I was.
It was very serene. It was like this respite from whatever was going on. You know, if you were skating, there was always air conditioning or whatever to stop in for a bit, and you just wandered. You know, it's really bizarrely similar to how we waste time on the internet now. I mean, it's not that different, really.
Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, because it's very democratic. Everything's accessible.
You just have to be quiet at the library and you have to be loud on the internet.
Wow. That's a damn good take. Okay. So you're at the library, you're teaching yourself stuff. Yeah. Then you work at this software company. Why did you leave?
There was an opportunity. So the owner of the one company was friends with this other company in supply chain and logistics, and they did a lot of work for like Herman Miller and Steelcase because it was in West Michigan area at the time, which is only like 2.5 hours out of Chicago. And I just was sometimes when I retell these stories, I'm like, was this me doing this stuff? Like, why did I feel so compelled to do this? And they were like, well, you know, would he want to come and kind of consult with us? We're trying to build out a software arm of our company, better inventory tracking systems and truck tracking systems. And so then that was my last real job, was that one. And I worked there for 6 years and eventually became kind of like, I guess you'd say like an executive level person at age 24. And it was just a very interesting time in my life, and wrote software for Hayworth, wrote their international supplier portal system and had to pitch it and sell it. And that's when I learned how to talk publicly and show products and that how things looked on the web. This is now on the web, how things looked and how people interacted with it, which we would now call UX. like really
Yeah, yeah.
mattered. But that was like my old quote used to be like, why is everybody at the DMV so upset? It's because they have to use shitty software, you know? And it was like, they should, you know, it's like, I don't think everything around you needs to constantly be beautiful. And that's totally subjective anyways. But like, I was really excited with taking these really boring supply chain problems. And it was like, well, what if it looks compelling? You know, like what if the UPS tracking page like looks really good or something like that? And so I was never a good programmer. In fact, sometimes I'm like, how did you guys let me do all this? Like there was no real safety net. But yeah, I then worked at that company for a while. And then I had my first hand at a startup, which was to help independent artists distribute their music kind of before iTunes was allowing independent artists to distribute their music. Think kind of like
Bandcamp,
like
TuneCore
a
thing?
very poorly made Bandcamp. Yeah,
Sure.
would be my version. And I raised money for my first time on that one and then didn't really go anywhere and a couple other little startups and then Boxed Water. Yeah.
Yeah, because Boxed Water, I think,
But
is
the Brilliance is going on during this whole time. Brilliance is like 2005.
Wait, oh, it was?
Yeah. So like,
Oh.
right. I mean, I cold rolled the entire thing, the content management system, the whole thing. That site's completely from scratch. That's why it looks the way it does at the back end, the whole thing. Yeah.
So, okay, here's the thing. So, especially for people who work in engineering and tech and whatever developer side, that they're full stack or whatever, rarely is there someone who has the understanding of UX, but also has all the programming knowledge. And I know that a bunch of people are going to message me and be like, actually, that's not true. But I feel like in the era that you were coming from,
You
that
had to
wasn't.
do it all.
Yeah.
Which sure, it was back when there were like IT departments and stuff like that. That basically, it's like when a company would have its own servers on site, which is like so old now. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would host it somewhere else now, or you know. Yeah, I don't know. I think, to be honest, I don't think I ever really loved programming sometimes as much as it even sounds like I do. It was the result of it. And so that's what drove my interest in UX and UI, which we would call it now. Is like I just liked making really interesting web presences. I like making things that were useful to people or that someone smiled maybe when they used it. And if you were it's hard to do that if you don't have any users. So I kept getting these opportunities, whether it was a really boring system like a cross-docking system where you're checking in packages. I'm like, what if it looked cool? And that was entirely me pushing what I thought was cool on them, you know? And the funny thing about all this is like, it sounds very like Apple-like because I later became very obsessed with Apple in the early days and Steve and all that stuff. But I was a PC user for like forever.
Really?
Which is like really weird. But for software back then, that was what you used.
Yeah, it's true. So what's informing cool to you at this time in your life?
Community. I think a lot about like you have this podcast and allows you to constantly interact with interesting people. And I think like that's like such a gift, and it requires maintenance. It requires scheduling on your part and time and being a conversationalist and all that kind of stuff. I admire people who are building things that keep them really plugged in with humanity even though we're recording this digitally and we're not sitting next to one another. This is a human conversation. So I'm really interested in that. I find podcasting really interesting. It's very web 1.0, but it has survived. Nothing's really changed about the format.
The RSS feed,
Truly,
which is good and bad.
Right. And it's direct. The creator owns it. Yes, they're using distribution channels and things like that, but they're not really subjected to the algorithm. They're just subjected to creating something from scratch. So that's a really abstract answer, but I'm really interested in community-based things or like projects that connect you with other people.
So what were your message boards then?
I was a Nike Talk guy, Super Future.
Okay.
And I think that's it. I never posted on them though.
You just lurked?
Yeah. I never posted on Nike Talk once, I don't think.
Well, yeah, I don't think you missed much.
I kind of loved it. It was weird. I think I was consuming it the same way I consume podcasts. I just listened to them or watched them to stay really up to date on what's happening. Like I find the feed of it very interesting.
Nike Talk was great. For folks that didn't know, is a message board that was basically a sneakerhead message board. And the thing about Nike Talk, at least for me, it was the first. I was in Style Forum and Super Future and Style Zeitgeist, and I was on some Reddit stuff, and then I was on Network 54, which is a watch forum. But Nike Talk was one of the only ones, which is surprising based on what Style Forum is now, that had like a toxicity to it. Where like true. People would kind of fight.
There were characters too, and it was like it lived offline and online, and obviously I didn't participate in any of that, but yeah, there was like character. I know some of them personally still today.
Yeah, it was a cool. I mean, I will say like I learned a ton about sneakers and releases and retros and all this stuff from that era. But so were there certain people that you would do like in-person meetups or whatever that you got more?
No.
No?
No, this makes it sound like I was so weird. I mean, the Brilliance was also catching up at the same time too, but like it was really Chuck that gave the Brilliance the boost that it had, right? Because he had such
let's explain the Brilliance then for some folks who don't know.
How do we?
Yeah, I mean it's what this collective of I don't even know what the right word is to call it.
It started from, this is the podcast, the Dusty podcast with me dating myself, but it started because Chuck and I constantly would communicate all day long on what people would think of as text now. But this is even before we didn't use AIM or MSN Messenger for some reason. We just would have really long email threads, and there'd be jokes or a link to something we thought was interesting or some new design thing that we found compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, we should start a blog with this, because blogging was starting to happen at the time. And I said, cool. So like we rolled this site up, and then I think the magic addition to it was just little these quick posts. I mean, if you go to thebrilliance.com now, you'll see exactly like
this is like a zine sort of thing, but because blogging was almost like derogatory early on.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. I think zine's like a really cool way to describe that, because and it kind of still, of course, has that aesthetic today. But we were just, it was so random. And the randomness and leaving the typos in was actually part of the brand, the way that it looked. It was all in Times New Roman, which was the default font setting for browsers back then if there wasn't a font code. And we thought that was really funny. And so everyone else was trying to polish everything pixel perfect. And they were like, do you guys know your site looks like that? It was like so bad. And then that became the brand. And I learned a lot about marketing and communication, I think, through that process and having it work. And then we added in the interviews, and the interviews, I think, are really what made it, I don't know, respected, I guess. I mean, getting Futura to do an interview with us really early on kind of like gave us a free pass for probably still to this day.
But I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you guys were really taking all the credit for the Brilliance early on. It wasn't like, you had a masthead and it was like, these are the guys, these are the people behind this stuff.
There was no links to social back then. So it's like, we did have an about page that was like a picture, I think, of me and Chuck, and then eventually me, Chuck, and Virgil sitting at a train station, but it kind of didn't matter. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think it may have had our masthead, like thoughts on the internet from Benjamin, Chuck, and Virgil, but like when you clicked them, it's like, where did it go? It would have to go to your own website, and I didn't have anything on my website. So yeah,
no, you're right. Yeah, that makes more sense.
But no, we didn't. But we also weren't really active on. To your point, like we weren't jumping on the message boards, being like, I'm the Brilliance writer guy.
Yeah. Your Reddit AMA.
Right. Truly.
Yeah, that's right. And then Boxed Water hits what?
2009 is when we started.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is where a lot of people really were like trying to connect the IRL of you, because I remember it was at RSVP, right?
Yeah, that was the first store in Chicago that we launched it in. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was with, that would have been Virgil and Don. And Don C, Don Crawley. Did you ever get one of his snapbacks?
I don't know. I may have one stashed somewhere. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire scene of streetwear in the past 20 years. He's so great. I just love
Wait, why is that?
Have you ever interacted with him?
Not like one-on-one.
Well, he's back here in Chicago now. He was living in LA for a little bit, but I don't know. There was something about him, and when Virgil started working with Kanye and stuff, like you would interact with Don quite a bit if you were around that scene.
Yeah.
And he's just like, everyone described it. He's like unbelievably caring, fascinated about what you're doing, deeply aware of everything that's going on. And he's one of those like never forgets a detail. Like it would be 5 years and I wouldn't see him, and he'd be like, "Yo, Ben, what's going on?" And he would like, stand up and give you a big hug in front of all these famous people he was with, and he really made you feel included. But he also was like he's like a walking encyclopedia of everything that's happened in the last 20 years.
Jeez, that's a heavy amount of empathy.
He's just a cool guy, man. He's very cool.
Yeah. Hello, is this thing on? All right, whatever. We got to get new gear. We got to get some new threads, whatever you want to call it. Check out the folks at Standard and Strange. Not only do they sponsor this podcast, hello, but they're one of my favorite stores on earth, with locations in New York, Oakland, and Santa Fe, with incredible brands like Real McCoy's, Orslo, Freno, and more. Look, they even got brands I don't even know how to pronounce, but they're cool, and so are you. You gonna get some quality gear from a quality crew? Does that sound cheesy? I don't even care, because their clothes and team are so good! So visit standardandstrange.com or check them out in person at one of their amazing stores. That's standardandstrange.com. And now, back to the show. So you got the Brilliance going, you have Boxed Water, and all of a sudden you are famous.
No,
you're influencer. No, but I mean, I think that was the thing too, is like you were the influencer's influencer. I don't really know any other better way, but
I kind of actually didn't, maybe it's the aw shucks like Midwestern in us, but I didn't really talk about my direct involvement being the founder of Boxed Water. You can even hear it still. And just a preface, like that company feels like a lifetime ago to me. It's almost the same as the programming era and all that kind of stuff. I tend to have these waves in my life that the next wave is significantly different than the previous. I think they all inform one another, but that one, having a product so I did the first round of funding to get it onto the shelves and like promptly like ran my accounts to, total zero to get it onto the shelves. And some investors came in that were great and they helped out and that's like a whole other story and kind of the scale of it. But launching something physical after being digital for so long, right? Blogging and software development, and you could touch it and people could buy it for $1.50 or whatever it was at the time, was a high I hadn't really experienced before, creating something that people responded to in person. And then it was such an easy model. It's like, this store is selling some, get into more stores, And so that era, we just ran really hard for 3 years. And I didn't really think about my personal identity being tied at all to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing too, is because maybe it is the Midwest stuff, right? Because there's very little, and this is refreshing, there's very little arrogance in these things. Even as we're talking, you're trying to find ways to credit other people.
I mean, well, I have a company named Benjamin Edgar, so I guess I have some sort of hubris to be like, yeah, that's my name.
Yeah, but maybe because you just didn't care to think.
I kind of wish I would have named it something else.
Yeah, see, there it is.
But well, because I was out for a walk with Sam Ross from A Cold Wall one time, and we were just talking. I'm a huge fan of like everything he does and how he kind of like moves within the space. He's really carved his own lane. I think we'll look back on him as quite a creator. And he was like, mate, you kind of screwed up using your name. You can never sell this company. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You know what I mean? It was like a funny way to think about it.
I mean, Helmut Lang would disagree with you. He seems to be pretty happy.
Mark Jacobs and, a bunch of other people too. But I think like it was just a funny thing where I was like, ooh, you're right. Because I don't have any investors or anything like that. That company is completely independent. But no, so Boxed Water gets quite large and,
quite large.
Yeah, it's quite big. It's really interesting though. I think a lot of the projects I've started, and I think a lot of just the internet in general, I would say that company, my own company and all those, they cast a larger shadow than sometimes the reality. So I have to like remind people, like, no one is crazy. I'll just like make sure everyone knows, like, no one's crazy wealthy from that thing yet or anything. I mean, sure, maybe there's some stock value on paper and things like that. But to me, it's more satisfying actually the most satisfying part about that company, one was attempting to solve an environmental problem incrementally rather than like, oh, we're just going to swing a hammer at this or yell at customers and tell them they need to do, change their life this way. It's like, let's adapt and let's work within the existing behavior. But the fact that the design of it is where I do have maybe a little bit of arrogance, because I remember being like, we didn't have investors at the start. So the design was entirely my own. And I would look at the Nelson bench, which is like one of my favorite pieces of furniture. And it's kind of boring, but it's like
George Nelson. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And it lives in museums. I saw they have them at LaGuardia now, and they live in mid-century modern homes and they look really good when they're worn out and all that. And I was like, that's the goal, is a design that never changes, isn't obnoxious and yelling at you, but is like, ooh, I know what that is instantly when I see it. Yeah. And that was the goal. And so for the fact, Boxed Water actually has probably had about like 7 different iterations on the design since we started. But the fact that it still works today is probably my favorite part. It's just kind of unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I think, because it's like for someone my age, it reminded me of milk in school, and milk in general. I mean, everyone had paper milk things, which is what we're doing now, except now there's a little plastic thing where it's easier to pour. But
we tried to do one without that. Actually, it wasn't shelf stable, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, it's with the pop in the little corner and
we actually have done ones that don't have the spout at all and have like the most amount of paper possible, because that's the goal. And we would do them for marathons, so you were basically just chugging the small one in one shot rather than needing to reseal it. But we were obsessive in the early days about that. But that company is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's interesting too. There's a bit of an egoless design, and I don't know why I keep honing in on this, because it sounds like you make things and then you're past them versus like adding them as like armor on your career and your resume.
I probably internalized that. I've definitely had some friends be like, dude, if you just put together like a CV or something, you could get a job like anywhere. But then I'll be like, yeah, but then I'd have to have a job. But
this is not solving the core problem.
The whole point was to not have a job. In regards to putting things behind me, I don't put them behind me, but I'm obsessed with the products speaking for the company rather than the creator or the founder. Humans can fail. I don't think products can't fail, but like humans are complicated people or complicated beings. And if it's entirely based on the creator and not the product, I think you start to something happen. Yeah, I don't know. And it's so funny because I don't idolize Steve Jobs, but I love what he built, and he was very much the figurehead of it. And I do think the company's a little bit more sterile now with him not there. But
and there's no Johnny either. I mean, because it sounds like you're Mark Newson, Johnny Ive guy.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I lean probably more Johnny than Mark, but like I'm like obsessed with the whole Love From thing. I think like that's one of the cooler kind of quiet companies that's been started. Every time I bring up Sam again, like I've seen him hanging out with Mark. I'm like, oh, I just want to be a fly on the wall and like hear what they're talking about, But no, so that I think I have had people be like, I was recently hanging out with someone in New York and was like, oh, the company, I was like, a box water, I've been fairly busy with that or something. They were like, well, what's your involvement there? And I had to be like, started it, and they were like, they don't believe you, like it's, so I don't know what it is about me that's a little coy about that stuff, but.
Oh, really? So wait, they didn't believe you? They
believe you, but it took them like a minute to like, I know they wanted to Google it, you know what I mean? But
I think it's because you're not an arrogant prick. And I think this is the downside, right?
And I'm sure I can be. We can give it a try.
But like, I think there's even people joke about this. It's called founder syndrome, right? And a lot of times that phrase comes from founders being so intertwined in their product and their company that they more or less have blinders on, and they're unable to listen to counsel and feedback, and they become so emotionally intertwined in their own company that they build their ego into their product. And I think the biggest thing that you mentioned that I'm the most excited by is you're like, no, it's about the product on its own. And the humans have failed, and they're failures, and they continue to fail, and they're driven by ego. A product has no ego. That's
accidentally more philosophical than I meant it to be, but it's somewhat true,
Well, and that's the thing is I'm like, okay, so where did that? I mean, because there's a level of almost enlightenment that you're at, that having the divorce from the ego and the product. And I know you were kind of talking a bit about that, but to just kind of pick at that a little bit more, because I don't think is something that's learned through experience.
I think when some people ask me, boy, did I know we were going to get this philosophical.
My bad.
No, it's really fast. I think about this stuff actually quite a bit, and I talk with other friends about it. I don't know if it's learned as much as I think a deep amount of it is there's probably some insecurity. I don't really love the phrase because it's overused, but imposter syndrome stuff.
Yep.
When something finds success. Also, they're just being really candid, like, and I don't know if enough people kind of talk about this, but if something finds, if it casts a really huge shadow, or it gets a lot of press, or it enables you a life that is, there's more kind of people looking at you, yet maybe it hasn't like performed financially as well as you want to, or there's shakiness behind the scenes, because that's just the reality of companies. Peek behind the curtain of any company, and it's probably not what you think it is.
Absolutely.
There can be a disconnect, I think, in the founder or the creator or even team members, where they're like, the outside thinks this and the inside reality is this. And that dissonance between the two is probably baked into me to always be like, watch your step. Like, don't get too proud. Don't get too happy. Maybe not get too happy, but like, just be careful. Watch your step,
Does that come from your mom or your dad?
I don't know. That one, I don't know. I think it comes from leaving home really early. And like, everything's on, my parents didn't give me any money. I think my mom, she took me to IKEA and got me a couch and some like, some silverware and some, all the stuff that you need for your kitchen and stuff. But it was just me. Yeah.
Did you ever go back to your folks and go do something nice for them?
I haven't bought anybody like any Rolexes or anything yet. No. I hang out with my mom quite a bit. We go to dinner a couple times a month.
Who picks up the tab?
I try to, yeah.
There it is. Yeah, man. No, I say it because I do the same thing, and where because I didn't have some of these things when I'm around my mom. Because one of the reasons I moved back to St. Louis was to try to take care of my folks. My dad's he's in a facility, he's in a home, like a home where he'll be forever. And my mom's on her own. And so when I'm out with my mom, I'm like, you will have no hardship.
Yeah.
I'm paying, we're doing it.
It's dialed in, to like, should I have some sort of significant windfall and stuff? I think it would be very, very enjoyable to
Yeah.
share that, you know.
And this isn't about you go and you buy your parents a house. This isn't like The Rock sort of thing where it's like, yo, I went, you know, because I
think when I hear people talking about that, I'm like, that had very little to do with your mom. It sounds like it has a lot to do with you. You know what I mean?
It has a lot to do with your taxes is basically the thing.
That,
it's like, well, we made
like,
a trust and all
I
these
want to do this. Like, I want to talk about that I did it. I think that's always been a little funny. You know what I mean? Like, I almost find it to be a little bit more private, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's even better because, you know, even me, it's not like you go and you put it on the feed where it's like, yo, I treated my folks or I did this, right? But I think for me, I still have, and I want to be conscious to never project here, and maybe occasionally I am, is that, you know, you want them to know that you're okay.
I think it does. It's a form of projecting like it all worked out.
Yeah, like I got it. Yeah. So anyway, I digress. So you continue to build this company. And then the object company starts, which I think is kind of great because even though, you know, you were speaking with your friend who had given you the feedback of that it's your own name, is there anything that you think you can or can't make that's limited by your company? Because I mean, from weird little cigarette things to shirts and stuff, like what's the line that runs through the company?
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine, Archie from PlayLab. He's like kind of a mentor of mine and just a dear friend. And he was like, I have no idea what you're going to make next. And that's my favorite part. And I was like, me neither, you know, like I don't, you know, but, cause my product cycle is actually pretty quick from like idea to touching it is usually like 3 to 4 months. So I've like really worked hard at like the denim and stuff like that and the shoes and stuff that of course took longer, but like cigarette holder was probably like 3 months from like having the idea to having it for sale. And so I can go really quick and that allows the ideas. Cause like, I think that ideas, like they just kind of erode over time. So something happens, but I would say like the object company is like, that it's found any success and that strangers buy it is like the ultimate sensation, right? That people you don't know are patronizing this thing, discovered it, chose to give you some money and seem happy with it. That's my favorite part of it, but it is a personal utopia. And, you know, Jean Toutot talked a lot about that, you know, in the earlier days of APC, that he was kind of creating this like utopian place for himself. That's what I'm doing. I'm looking for the, you know, there's no investors. It's just me.
Yeah.
It's profitable, tiny but profitable. And it has this red thread and it has a bit of a following now where I just feel incredibly lucky that I have a platform and this platform allows me to explore materials. Because I think actually to answer your question, it's just about the materials. I'm obsessed with, I've seen this milling process or this casting process. What product could I make through my language with that?
Oh, okay. So you're not necessarily, it's not like the whiteboard of like, this is the object that solves the issue. It's you're witnessing how things are being created and then you're finding something that can be created with it.
And to be more philosophical is like every object is a self-portrait is how I describe it. So as I've like, you know, you're talking earlier about like, why do you kind of hide behind the things? It's like, these are very personal things because they're not useful. They're not solving any problem beyond your emotional satisfaction or desire. When you get the product, you're like, I like this. And I bought it because I like it, not because it quenches my thirst or fulfills me in some other way. So like, it's very selfish. I mean, it's an incredibly selfish project, but yeah. So first it's about the material, and then it's like running it through the lens of like, how would I interpret this material as a self-portrait?
Well, if it's selfish, why do you sell it?
So I can make more.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like if it
Why
was really selfish,
their work, you know, it's like a very interesting question. I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is the amount of artists that don't ever had any intention. You think Vermeer wanted to be like, you know, the guy?
Yeah,
the dude basically bankrupted himself trying to spend all of his money on paint. Was like an idiot with his finances.
There's a compulsion for sure. I think.
Yeah.
I've told people I was like, I could be homeless or really, really wealthy. The compulsion to create, if you have it, is inherent. The hardest part is trying to find out a way to do it sustainably so it doesn't stress you out. And when I say sustainably, I mean for it to make some money, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, you got to pay bills. I think that's the thing is like, we're not in the utopian society. I mean, you got to pay for your milk and your coffee and all these other things. Or, you know, but did you ever read Walter Isaacson's Da Vinci book?
I did actually, yeah.
The craziest thing, yeah, that's all right. That counts. The craziest thing, like when I was reading that or listening, whatever, was the fact that like the dude didn't really realize that he was an artist, and
he was an engineer.
you know, yeah, and I think that was the thing, and the art was simply a way. He was like, oh, this has value to people, and so I can make these paintings and do these things for people. But even then, he didn't even know how to let things go. I mean, the fact that like he kept working on the Mona Lisa for so long, like that, it makes me wonder what was the mindset, and like what other artists have this similar mindset in which like, one, things are never done, which is dangerous, and then two, the fact that like if you're making something to fulfill something else, how will you be fulfilled?
Well, a small anecdote is like I've had products sell out, and I'm like, oh man, they're all gone now. You know, what I mean?
You never make more. That's the other thing.
Well,
like,
I do. I've restocked, like, I keep talking about the cigarette holder, but I've restocked that one like 5 or 6 times. It's quite successful. But every time,
I believe it's sold out right now. Just
yeah, I know.
Pulled it up.
Just did earlier this week, and I was like, all right, gotta make some more. But I remember every time a product sells out and like the inventory is all gone. Obviously, it's nice. Like it means it worked and people really liked it. But there's this like, I like being around the objects. I mean, that probably makes me sound a little crazy, but like I like being around. I think it's fun to be around. Like I have a table full of samples next to me of products that I've been working on and things like that. So. And I think to your point about Da Vinci and like all that, I think he was selling those paintings and getting commissions or what would you call it back then, patronage, because he had a life to pay for and all that. But I think it's like I've gotten really into milling in 316 stainless steel, which is surgical stainless steel. It's very expensive, and the more my products are successful, the less I worry about that expense of making the things I want to make at the highest quality I can possibly make them. So that's where the commerciality comes in for me.
On the steel stuff, what's the difference between 316 and 904?
Couldn't tell you. I'd have to look at the two alloys. It's probably some sort of combination of the nickel that's in it and the corrosion resistance. Is 904 like watch steel?
Yeah, that's the only reason why I knew 904.
Oyster steel or whatever. It's like similar to what Rolex uses.
Yeah, 316 is surgical grade is what I know, and then 904 is supposed to be even more corrosion
I think it's
resistant.
even more. So it's probably like a higher nickel content or whatever it might be, probably harder to mill.
Oh, okay. Yeah. As some, I have a sad collection of steel watches, and I'm always awesome. Like, how long are these going to last?
Forever.
Is this good?
It's pretty crazy how stable a watch band is.
Yeah. Do you ever see yourself getting into the watch stuff?
I've been trying to buy a watch for 20 years and I just can't pull the trigger. I don't know. It's some sort of weird, my dad was into them a bit. I remember I told myself, and I was like, if you can buy 3, I was going to get an Air King. That was going to be my first
Why an Air
watch.
King?
What's that?
Why an Air King?
It was the cheapest one.
Okay, yeah, fair. That was my first Rolex.
And it was like, this is in like 2000. And I achieved that. And I remember being like, all right, like in your fund. And I just couldn't do it. I don't know what it was about that. I have that thread through me too and I spend plenty of money, but yeah, no, I want to get into watches. I think right now I would probably lean towards like AP, and I know everyone is on it, the AP wave, but I'm really weird. I talk with Brent about this a lot. I like two-tone watches, which is super weird because it doesn't even necessarily fit with my aesthetic.
Two-tone watches are great because in a weird way, they will always be timeless. When people are like, oh, they're coming back in, it's like they never left. Yeah. The people that have been buying two-tone watches have never paid attention to.
Yeah, they're kind of obtuse, I think. It's like, oh, I know that shape, but interesting that you went with the two-tone.
Yeah. Yeah. The two-tone Explorer, the most recent iteration of the Rolex Explorer that came out, they did one in two-tone, which is just bizarre to many people. And I think it's incredible. I mean, if I would have had the money, I would have gotten that instead of my steel one. But it's just a very double take watch versus like a Datejust or something.
But I don't think I could ever design a watch. I've chatted with some. I mean, I did for fun years ago. Worked on one with a friend as like a mental exercise. But there's something so sacred and like about. I think that's like I have a friend who's a car designer at Rolls Royce, which is like pretty insane. Yeah. And I can't even. I talk about the details and wheels, and I'm very obsessed with cars. But I've never taken a pen to a piece of paper and been like, look at this shape, And I think it's very similar. I think it's very similar with watches. There's certain things where I'm just like, that's not for me.
I think that there is a shape, but also this shape, right? This is a very bizarre. This is a Universal Genève. It looks like a tank.
It looks beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it's a cool watch. I mean, yes, it is like the shape, but I think the other thing, a lot of people that I've seen that get into watches, they're always making like casts and like because it's the feel of the object on your wrist.
Absolutely.
Versus just the shape. I mean, because like Gerald Gento, when people talk about the Royal Oak or the Nautilus, it's like these cool shapes and elongated lines and all that stuff. But I mean, just having how these things feel on your wrist, and the fact that in most cases every wrist really is different. I mean, that's the thing, because people were like, oh man, small watches are coming back. I think it's like, no, the people who are influencing watches just have smaller wrists right now.
That's a fascinating way to view it. You're right. I guess.
Yeah.
I talked to a friend about this as well. That's really because I have a really thin wrist, and I look at just even a 36 on me looks huge.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, yeah, like 36 or 37. I just got the recent Tudor Black Bay. That is it's a 37 millimeter. So it's a Tudor Black Bay 54. There was the 58, which was like 39-ish, 38. But it's even smaller because it's supposed to look like the original sort of subs and the Tudor of that time. And it's sick. And it's crazy, just like the fact that we're talking millimeters smaller. You're like, this is a whole other thing.
It really
I've never
is,
experienced
though.
anything like it.
It's like the tiniest detail. It's like I think about denim, and denim is the same way. It's like the tiniest edit on a pair of jeans, especially now that we're back wearing a higher waisted jean, is the tiniest change to that has such a dramatic fit, and it communicates so much. Are they tight? Are they straight? Are they wide? Stovepipe? Are they wide? And the denim thing is fascinating in comparison to the watches.
Do you think there's any sort of weird parallel between designers and designers' own expressions of themselves? Because I feel like in most cases, most designers have a uniform and they don't really change that much in their own physical appearance and what they wear, but the objects that they're making are always changing.
I think about this a lot because I remember my first time, it was like one of Marc Jacobs' spring shows in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And he came out and he was back when he had the longer hair. He had the clear glasses.
Pre-glow up.
Yeah. When he was under the influence. And he would wear a blue Comme des Garçons shirt, I think, and gray slacks and
it was white tennis
Stan
shoes or
Smiths, I
something,
think.
usually.
And I remember being like, wait, none of it's Marc Jacobs? Like you can get all of it. Like, why aren't you wearing? And that was a huge epiphany for me that then helped me later on in life when I became far more uniform. There's a photo I found of myself from like 15 years. I was like, I'm wearing the exact same outfit, like down to the sweater, like the whole thing, the navy polo, navy merino sweater, like blue jeans. Like that's it, and I don't know what it is. I think maybe we find more satiation, or the part of the brain that needs to express itself gets projected onto the things that we make. And then for me, I don't feel the need to stand out at all. I certainly don't enjoy standing out.
But then there it is, right? This is almost the whole pod. But like, why don't you feel the need to stand out? You let your objects talk for yourselves. And I think different personalities, they may have trash in their home,
sure,
no other cool understandings of them, but everything that they're embodying physically is always different and changing.
I mean, when you see someone dressed well, though, like the older I get, the more I respect that. Not just like, oh, you got the nice label on or whatever, but like someone who truly dresses well and that doesn't look like the clothes are wearing them, because I think that's a tricky thing. Like, are you wearing the clothes or are the clothes wearing you? I feel like anytime I put on something interesting, especially if you're a heavy uniform dresser, when you change, obviously your friends are gonna be like, what is that? But you yourself don't feel comfortable, and that it projects, right? So when I see someone who can dress like crazy, not crazy, just like fully express themselves, and they look like elegant, it's like that's probably one of the cooler things to see.
Who popped into your head when you said that statement?
I mean, Jeremy O'Harris, like just incredible, right? Sam Hine. Then there's people like, I don't know, it's like obviously Phoebe Philo dress is really simple, but if anyone else were to try and wear that proportion, I think it would look out of place on them. Think about Karl Lagerfeld. Like, how cool is that? Like have you ever watched that documentary about him?
Oh yeah.
Where he opens the drawer and it's like 1,000 different collars in it. That blew my mind. I was like, man, that's exactly what I hoped you had.
This is like Edwardian stuff where it's like,
holes full of chrome hearts rings. Like that dude was on a whole other wave, man.
Yeah, I really admire that. And I'm only maybe the past 3-4 years have I tried to find a way where it's like, maybe I got to just stop chasing all these other things that I like, or I can like something, but not have to own and embody all of it. It's like, look, I'm just going to have the same, 501s or whatever, and white Oxfords and blue Oxfords and a sweater, and just move on with my life.
I once asked a friend who has an image blog. This was years ago. And he had posted something. I was like, oh, wow, do you own? It was a pair of jeans. I was like, do you own a pair of those? He's like, no, I have the JPEG. And I was like, ooh, perfect answer.
Sounds like someone who uses their initials a lot.
Yeah. the boy Justin.
Yeah, that's such a good response. Damn.
That's what I thought.
Because
it has stuck
you
with me
don't
for
need
like
to
10
own it.
years. Yeah. He probably doesn't even remember it, but I remember that being like, what I took from that was that you can deeply appreciate something, be very knowledgeable on it, and not need to own it.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
God.
certainly there's some, it's like if you sat and talked about how food tastes all day and had never tasted, that might be a bit odd, but I think it is nice to own things and to participate in it. But it's fun to just be into it too. It's like a sport.
Are there any objects or things that have been the opposite for where it's like, no, I have to own this?
Yes. I started collecting art, nothing like crazy, probably 15 years ago. And there's a slight obsession for sure.
Okay.
So like,
hit me. What do you got?
My crowning piece that I bought recently is I have a original Max Lamb chair, which is like a huge deal for me to have that. I bought it from Salon 94. And I have since bought some other stuff from them too. But like, I know it's a little cliche, but I buy like a lot of the art chairs. So it's like I have a Donald Judd original, the one, because Salon 94 now has his estate for furniture. I got one of the Judd pine chairs.
Whoa.
Jonathan Mickey's an artist who just got his stuff acquired by Vitra Museum and the Art Institute.
Yep.
I have one of his carbon fiber chairs. And then I buy younger, I'm looking around my apartment. I buy younger designers' chairs. Obviously I have the Tom Sachs chair like everybody else does.
Yeah.
No, the art and object stuff for me is like a compulsion for sure. Like I have to own, like here's a good example. Like I don't have the capital to, and it's just interesting, nor do I really like his work all the time that much, but I'm a huge Jeff Koons fan, like massive. I'm more interested in his interviews than I am in like his art. I did a Brilliance post on this actually a while ago about how I like his interviews sometimes more than his art, but I have bought as many of the ads that he did. Do you remember when he was taking ads out in art form? So I buy those and I have like the original cuts of the ads, like the banality one and all that stuff. And then I bought recently a drawing, it's an original drawing from him where someone had him sign the inside of this book that was a huge piece of paper that just says Gagosian on it. And then he signed a flower on it and dated it. I think it's 1997. So that's that was a compulsion to be like, I have to own and participate in this, not just read the interviews. So that I certainly deviate in some instances.
Wow. That's also cool because it's not so much about the core product of the artist, but just like other things that it's very like Warholian.
Yeah. And then I have like quite a bit of Tyrell Winston's work. He's a very dear friend of mine, but I started buying his stuff before we were like buds. I have some of his stuff too.
Damn.
Yeah, I think people think my taste in art and things like that would be a little different than, like, here's a funny one. Do you remember when Virgil did the Vitra collaboration? It was like there was like a chair and a lamp. He did the classic Privé one, Privé chair and Privé lamp. I obsessively collected the ceramic bricks that he did that were numbered. So like I have like 7 of them because I thought that was the most kind of obtuse thing in the whole collection. The chair seemed almost like obvious to me, but these weird ceramic bricks, I was like, how did he sell that to Vitra? Like, what was the conversation like, when he was doing that? They're like these cast ceramic bricks with a screen printed number 1 to 1,000 on each one. It's like those are the kind of objects I'm more interested in. Like these like the Max Lamb stuff is like very bright,
Yeah. 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 That's interesting. Well, on the Virgil stuff, I mean, you guys you interacted together, but like, did you guys work together much?
Didn't ever work together a lot. Just a deep, friendship. I mean, it started around the Brilliance era, crashing on each other's couches and stuff, as we were coming up together. This is in 2006 and stayed really close. Like, I mean, I was in like in a wedding, it's like weird things. Like, I think I always tell people like, there was 2 buckets for him that I had mentally. It was like, there was a friendship that was just a friendship, like 2 friends hanging out, going to dinner or whatever. And we rarely would talk about work when we hung out. And then there was like, I was a fan. Like a total fan. And I think I would have absolutely been the same fan had I not known him. So it's a really interesting relationship, to be like, to watch him find his legs and find his success and define, I think, an era. And then to be buds with him too,
Yeah. I mean, I think I have a friend that's a similar situation in which they're on a music side and they have a very strong personality in music. But like for me, when we hang out, we don't really ever, it's never about like the career or any of the sort of achievements or any of the things that are happening. It's just like they're fun
human.
of a TV show.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Something.
Like we're going for a walk or like talking about the food that we're eating or going to a basketball game or something. Yeah, but yeah, he was a North Star for me. It continues to be. And even back, early on, I was like, man, this guy's special. His way of communicating, his passion, his desire, like to participate at the highest level was pretty infectious.
Yeah, I mean, the excitement obviously that I've picked up with just also the fact that everyone can be an artist.
Yeah.
Which I probably still don't believe.
Same.
And that's my own fault.
Yeah, I
But
still have my own
think
insecurities.
that-
But it's one thing to crack the door open. It's another one to just enable everyone to feel a certain way,
Yeah. I really admire that. And I think that's something that I want to find ways to get better at on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, to jump on the car stuff, you had said that you're a big car guy.
That doesn't own a car currently, but yeah.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
What do you mean you don't own a car? You live in Chicago, downtown.
Yeah, it just sat across in my lot, like fully detailed. It was the last one I had was a Audi A5 competition, and
whoa, okay,
yeah.
So yeah, all right.
I've had some interesting ones. I've had a couple Audis, couple Land Rovers, Saab 9.5 Turbo 2001 for the heads with the carbon fiber.
So you walked away before they blew up.
No, I was right at the end because I had to my window switches stopped working or were intermittently working, and the dealerships are kind of like closing. And we found someone or a Saab collector in Japan that had this part, and it was like unbelievably expensive. It was supposed to be like $80 or something. I think with installation, shipping, and everything, it was like $1,000. For this part. So that was towards the end, but I still like those cars were so weird, so quirky, so fun to drive. The car thing is, I'll eventually get one again. I mean, I waste a lot of time looking at them still, and I have friends now in the industry and stuff, but yeah, they're moving sculptures. They're such a communication device.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, because I was going to ask, I was like, what is it about cars and designers where it's like, that's the final frontier? No matter what you create and design, people still are like, yeah, but a car.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite the final frontier for me, but what's really what I'm most fascinated with the car thing is how new it is to like humanity. It's only like 100 years old, and not even really, like right around 100 where it's crept into. It is such a part of our humanity. It's like, like anyone gets successful. What'd you do? Bought a car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right.
I'm kind of fascinated with that. There's something tribal or something in us that's like the sense of freedom maybe that you have from a car. Getting your license when you're 16 and the sense of freedom that it communicates. And then, of course, you apply these veneers of luxury and things like that on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely connect on the freedom aspect. I mean, it's funny because my first car was through a family friend who had given us, he'd worked in Saudi Arabia for like McDonnell Douglas.
Wow.
And he gave us this 86 240 DL.
Very cool. I was going to say it has to be an old Mercedes, yeah.
It was an old Volvo.
Oh, I'm sorry, old Volvo, yes.
Yeah. And it was, and it's funny because I tell my friends now, and they're like, yeah, I want to get an old Volvo and I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah. They're so charming, but it's like it's going to be in the shop all the time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it had like 300 some odd thousand miles by the time it died and stuff. But like now, in the weird way, and I'm curious, like I'm more interested in all these cars that are just like overloaded with tech.
Mm-hmm.
That there's all not the self-driving sort of things, but it's like, what is it? The new like Hyundai Palisade. It basically can like back up and drive forward in very small increments for like parking assist from your hand.
Yeah. I saw someone
key fob.
parallel parking their car into this weird spot in an alley downtown the other day, and they were just standing outside with their phone, like driving their car into the spot. And I've seen a million. I've subscribed to way too many car YouTube videos, but to see it just in your neighborhood is like it was jarring. It was like, and I asked him, I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "It's a remote control. Look at this." Yeah.
Who's your car guy then? Is it like Doug DeMero?
Seen Through Glass guy, Sam from Seen Through Glass.
Oh yeah,
huge fan of him.
Yeah, he's really good.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good. I love. That's the only time I watch YouTube on my TV is to watch car stuff.
Yeah.
It's so good. Well, we're starting to wrap pretty soon here, but is there any other stuff you want to like add, mention, or plug or discuss before we?
No, I mean, again, thanks for having me on. I'm actually fascinated. I was wondering which direction we would go. And it's refreshing to talk about maybe the reasoning behind, or just to be kind of open with the reasoning behind we maybe make the things that we make, or work on the things that we work on, rather than like the specific product itself. The consumer will make their decision on the products. You know what I mean? I think what's more interesting is always the underlying. Like that's what when I listen to an interview with someone else, I'm like, talk about what makes you excited about making it, not always the materiality or the cost or the supply chain or whatever. Like, what was the point of it? I'm sorry, what was the genesis of it?
Yeah, for me I was like, well, okay, I was like, this guy, he's made all these things, so there's no interview that will do justice to the creation of any object, but there might be something that can do justice to the mindset of the creator, and to where it's like, okay, what gives you the confidence to make stuff? Because so I think, like, for me, it's like trying to connect with, I feel like I'm only able to connect with an artist product by knowing more about the artist. Like when I hear more about the struggle that was going on, to use kind of a trite example, between the Beatles and the interpersonal things that were going on in their lives, my relationship with their songs increased tenfold.
Completely agree.
And so, because I'm always trying to find some sort of human empathetic connection, because I'm like, oh, so not only were you able to make this, but what part of the struggle of your own life did you embody into this object accidentally? And I think about that a lot. Like, is there any product, that you've ever made where it was like, you know what, I was in this mindset and this is what I was doing, and then that kind of led me to this?
Well, I do think it goes back to, like you were saying, it's like, I'm a huge fan of the Rolling Stones, but probably really only listen to 8 songs. And maybe that's the case for a lot of people. But to me, it's like, cool, when I'm hearing and I'm listening to like the story, because I've consumed like every book I can about those guys, because it's such an interesting moment, and like the Nelcott stuff and like the way they were living, the traveling before that was even easy. I mean, planes were just kind of starting to come into like, oh, we can like use these. They were taking ships and stuff. They took a ship one time, I think, from the UK to Brazil or something. It's unbelievable. But that's what I'm hearing when I'm listening to music, or the Coon stuff, like his totally bizarre interviews where he's talking about like almost a religious nature of personal freedom that he's achieving through the art, rather than like when we go look at it, it's like, oh, like a shiny balloon dog. I'm more fascinated with that being applied to it. But are you saying, like, what was the question? Is it one of my objects? This one's coming out soon. I can show you this one. I don't know if you can see it.
Is it a trophy?
No, it holds a single flower. It doesn't look like anything I've made before. Let me show you this one. That one's actually the wrong one.
Oh my God, that's sick as fuck. Yeah, I see it. It looks immaculate.
Yeah, but it's the profile of my face, if you look at the negative space. So I'm staring at myself in it.
Dude, that's heady.
Yeah, well, it's taken from
deep.
It's taken from a Jasper Johns painting, and then I like reinterpret it. This one's milled out of a...
Don't discredit it. It's cool to sell the source, but it's, that's you.
Yeah, it's taken from that one's milled in aluminum. That's 6101, but we're doing it in stainless steel because I can't get the polish quite right on aluminum. But
yeah, aluminum's hard.
Yeah, it scratches super easy and it ends up looking kind of plastic. But that object, I think, is the first time, like, it won't have any tag or logo or words on it.
I feel like that's when you know that you have real success, is when you can kind of make something that maybe isn't fulfilling some sort of core need by every single person, but in a way it's just a connection to you.
And it's casting a halo on a hat that's $40 or $50 is the same thing as maybe this vase that is going to unfortunately be expensive because of the material we're making it in. It doesn't really matter to me because we're not selling that at scale. I'm more interested in it existing, beautiful photographs of it, and then the other products I make. Because I think if you're wearing the Chicago Switzerland hat, it's the same thing as the vase. They're the same product, basically.
Well, hold on. How?
Because it's an idea. It has very little to do. I mean, yes, the object, I try and make it the best we can. My hats are cut and sewn. It was like a whole process, but they're all coming from this. I think when I talk about this and I get more philosophical about it, I think it's really just a product of, like, if you kind of look at the waves I was talking about earlier, it's like software developer. That was very much me being like, what do you guys need? I'll make it. It had very little to do with me. And then my aesthetic started creeping in, my desire to maybe shift how it looked. And that was the end of it, because I basically atrophied in my skill, and as a software developer, increased my skill, and I hope I was increasing it in what people might desire. And then there was box water, which is a problem solving exercise. It wasn't that I was super passionate about water. I was looking at a problem in the market, but it was very like design driven. And now we've landed at the place where it's like I've fully, crossed through the membrane into attempting to just create my own small world. So when you're buying anything, any souvenir from the world is the same concept. It's the same person, same creator.
Okay. I will agree on that with your perspective. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, as someone who collects objects, likes objects, I think it's also, because obviously there's going to be people who have purchased your stuff and they've just put it in with everything else, but then there's others who, kind of like you were saying, like they're getting a connection to you. They're getting a deeper connection to you. But I think to be able to do that for both people with one object, I think is one of the most admirable things, is like, look, this can be the single serving thing, and you can put it in the shelf and you can walk away from it. You can use it in whatever. Or this is going to be a way where someone's like, no, this is an object company. This is a Benjamin Edgar product. This is, I think is really, really special. I'm serious.
I think the trick is like the cigarette holder is a super weird. It's almost 2 years old now, I think, in terms of being available.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sharing it with some friends early on because I share with there's like 3 or 4 people I share stuff with before they come out because I'm like, gauging their feedback, but I don't really care. I'm going to do it anyways because it's such a compulsion. But they were like, I think you really have something here, and that was my first thing that ever went like viral, like on Twitter. It got like,
yeah.
And I produced such a small amount for that first run. So it sold out in 45 minutes and I was like, shit. So, but when you pull that out of your pocket, there's an interesting metric. I'll give you this. I get a lot of orders for that thing at night, not during the day. And someone's out, like they're outside of a bar. I can picture it. They've had a couple drinks and they pull this thing out and someone's like, what the fuck is that thing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it prompts this conversation. And that to me is like, there's no Google marketing ad spend that can do that. And that's the only thing I know how to do is like prompt a response. And so the Switzerland Chicago is very jarring. Why does your hat say that? People stare at you when you wear it, which I remember the first time wearing it being like, shit, now people are staring at me. But what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? It's the same prompt as the cigarette holder. So I'm rambling, but you get the idea.
No, I think that's great.
It's about like super abstraction is kind of the point.
Yeah. Well, damn, I think that's a good spot to wrap. Well, Ben, thank you so much for hanging with me. It was great to meet you and to chat.
For sure.
Talk to you soon, man.
See ya.
All right, that's it for the show. Our show is produced by Blamo Media. We're edited by Amar Lal, and our theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. If you like what you heard, share the pod with a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcast. Do the stuff that you do when you like things. If you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@blamopod.com. And if you want more Blamo, you can join the Blam fam, right? Bad name, better vibe. All right. It's you can join us at patreon.com/Blamo, where we have tons of exclusive episodes, our amazing Slack community. We also got Blamo Presents Derek Guy. There's what else? The Triple J show. I mean, it's lots of fun there. So dive on in. That's it for me. I'll see you all very soon. Take care.